You can draw a sword like this, but it's much more effective to draw it in 3D. But drawing a sword with 3 dimensions often means using a term we call foreshortening, making things that are receding away from the viewer or towards us appear like they are shrunk or are condensed in certain areas. That would mean we have to draw the sword more like this. And that's what we're going to draw today. First means we have to decide where the object is coming from and where it's going to. We want to draw the sword, going away from us. So first, we need to set a horizon line here and a vanishing point. The vanishing point is the point in your drawing or in the 3D plane that we're drawing where all the parallel lines would disappear over the horizon. What we're going to do next is draw a triangle coming down from that vanishing point. And I'm sorry that the lines here are a little bit light. They are guidelines. I'm going to draw them a little bit darker, but when you're using your pencil, you can draw these really, really light. We want both these lines to be parallel, so we can draw a parallel line across the bottom of them. Now, with foreshortening, it can be difficult to assess where an object appears to get smaller and where it appears to be longer or more natural looking. If I show you this pencil from your perspective, it appears like it is condensed or shrunk as it gets down towards the tip. This part appears much larger, and that is basically what we're going to do with this sword, making the part of the sword that is closer to us appear larger and less condensed than the object or the blade, which is going to be farther away from us. We can add some more guidelines to help us with this. We want to draw a horizontal line close to the vanishing point. And then we're going to draw another one, a parallel line, almost an inch down the page. Now that we have 2 of these, we want to double the length of this each time we draw another line. So this one's about an inch. This one, we want to make it about 2 inches. You don't have to measure this. It does not have to be exact. Now, you can kind of use your pencil to get a sense, and that means that this one is about actually the right length. So we have 3 lines here that are of different lengths. Now these spaces in our 2D page appear to be, getting smaller. But we know in a 3D space, if we looked at this guideline from above, these are actually the same size boxes. They just appear smaller because they're getting farther away from us, the viewer. The same logic applies to the sword that we are going to draw. We know the sword is going to be a little bit thinner than these guidelines here, so let's draw another triangle that is a little thinner in the middle of our guidelines. Still going out to the vanishing point, but a little bit thinner, and it's extending, almost to the end, but leaving about an inch of space here before the end of these, overlapping boxes. This is going to be where the hilt of the sword begins. Now we already have some guidelines we can go off, and we can draw a horizontal line connecting the top of the sword to the hilt. Now let's extend these lines out a little bit. And now we're drawing a box, a 2-dimensional box here at the top of the hilt of the sword. Now we know that the hilt is going to be spherical, but for now we can draw it as a little bit more of a box and then kind of refine the shape into a sphere later on. To do that, let's extend 2 lines from the hilt that follow the curve or the angle of the lines of the blade towards that vanishing point. You'll notice how these lines get marginally farther away, as they come towards us. We can then extend these lines upwards and mirror those lines to create a 3-dimensional box here. We then can refine the shape on the side closest to us to add a little bit of a curve here to make the hilt appear curved. And replicate that curve as we go up the blade here. Now these are some more kind of finishing style details here, adding a little bit of cloth wrap over this blade. But this helps the viewer understand that the hilt is curved, it's not a square, even though we added square guidelines. Now let's add a pommel here on the sword. So we're just going to draw a circle that overlaps the hilt, fairly large. And we don't need to really do anything to make it 3D. You can just draw a 2D circle here. You can redraw that a couple times if it's tricky to get that angle right. And now we have the sword right in front of us, appearing to go back towards the distance. Well, we have most of the sword. But what we need to do now is refine this blade a little bit more. How we can do that is bring it in from the top left-hand side and bring it in from the right to create that lovely point. And then we have a blade that is receding into the distance. Now let's erase some of these guidelines. Once you've erased most of the guidelines, you can work on redrawing any lines that you might have inadvertently erased. So we have that nice outline of the sword, the hilt, and a pommel here. Now we've drawn this sword with a foreshortening technique. So the blade goes farther back towards the distance and it gets smaller. It appears like the sword is shrunk or warped because we're viewing it from a tight angle. The pommel closest to us is the largest part of the sword. However, we need to add some details, I think, to make the sword really stand out. First, we need to add that crease in the middle here. If you know what this part of the sword is, you can let me know in the comments. But it's on a lot of the blades, especially more like English style blades, they have that little kind of crease in the middle. And the blades are not completely flat. They're often angled, meaning that parts of the blade, the left or the right hand side, might be in shadow a little bit. And they're metal, meaning that there's a metallic kind of shine to the blade as well. If I show you my coffee cup here, you can see how the light hits this part and it's creating a little bit of a illusion like this is shaded or darker because of the way that the light plays off of metal. That means if we define where the sun is coming from, we can add some shading to the blade ourselves. Let's say the sun is coming from the left-hand side of the blade. That means we can add some really light shading to the right-hand side of the blade. We can leave a couple lighter sections to kind of give the illusion of that metallic glint. And we want to shade it in fairly lightly because it's not a huge angle. There's still some hitting that sun hitting that right-hand side of the blade. We can add some shading to the handle as well to make sure that it contrasts the lightness of the blade. In drawing, everything is about, the contrast of shading and line, and we want to make sure that it's clear that these are different materials. If the sun is coming from the left-hand side, that also means we need to shade in the right-hand side of the handle because it'll be away from the sun. So I'm adding some, hatching here on the left-hand side, making sure that the lightest part of the handle is on the top. That also applies to drawing the pommel here on the top. Let's say the pommel is metal as well. It means it's going to be a highlight right here where the sun's hitting it, and then there's going to be shadow underneath. And a little bit of light here as well because the sun or the shadow, is interrupted by the surface which might reflect some sun. That means we're going to draw some shading here, almost in a crescent moon. Getting lighter until it hits the top of the pommel with a small, tiny little bit of light here at the bottom. You can add some fun decorations or maybe some details to the handle, the hilt, something to make this sword your own. And even change the shape of the handle of the crossbar here to really suit your own needs. I find doing this freehand really gives me some more flexibility to kind of add some details or even some wiggly lines that really make the sword or the thing I'm drawing appear a little bit more unique. and like it's in my style. So that's why I didn't use a ruler for this lesson, though you definitely could if you wanted to. You can also add some shadow. We talked about how the surface that the sword is on might reflect some of the sunlight back and create a little bit of a light spot at the bottom of our pommel here. And we can draw that surface on by just, adding a little bit of shadow that mirrors the shape that we're drawing it in front of. So if the sun's hitting from the left-hand side, we can just draw a little bit of shadow on the right-hand side of the sword. Do the same thing underneath the blade a little bit, getting less distinct and narrower the closer it goes back to the vanishing point. Now, there are so many other details we could add here. Little drawings on the sword, we could add other weapons, and obviously we can add this to many different kinds of fantasy scenes, etc. But the core concept about foreshortening applies, and you can use these tips to draw any number of objects in 3D. Keeping in mind that the objects and the part of the object that's closer to us is going to appear larger and less warped, and the part of the object that recedes away from us into the distance is going to be condensed. We know that the blade of the sword is actually the largest part of the sword and the longest as well. But because the sword is on a tight angle to us, the viewer, it appears like it gets smaller the farther away from us it is. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, feel free to subscribe and follow along for more drawing tips.